CLNH, Abuse Prevention Training, Module number 1 of 3. This module, Introduction to Abuse Prevention. There are 3 modules that make up the abuse prevention training. Module number 1, Introduction. This module focuses on the outcomes of this training, an overview of the agency policy, definitions related to abuse, and the importance of work cultures. Module number 2 emphasizes strategies to prevent abuse. Module number 3 gives attention to reporting and investigating allegations of abuse. Training outcomes for abuse prevention. Staff be familiar with the agency's policy on abuse, SD, Service Delivery 01-020, and why it is important. Identify various forms that abuse can take. Be able to articulate what is a culture of abuse. Be able to identify factors that suggest abuse has occurred or is suspected. Describe several abuse prevention strategies. Know how to respond to a victim when abuse has been disclosed or is suspected. Know that you have a duty to report to the agency when abuse is suspected. Know the investigation will occur by police or the agency when abuse is reported and what that process looks like. What is the goal of abuse prevention training? To prevent, reduce, and eventually eliminate those places of organizational and system-level practice that contribute to people's vulnerability to abuse. Where do agencies like CLNH get their direction from on having abuse awareness and prevention training? Provincial Regulation 29910 is part of the Developmental Disabilities Act of 2008, and it became effective in 2010. Within the quality assurance measures of this regulation, it mandates training to be provided by agencies. Regulation 29910 mandates training on abuse prevention, identification, and reporting for all employees and volunteers who have direct contact with persons with developmental disabilities, and also that a refresher course be done every year thereafter. Regulation 29910 also mandates that individuals supported must have annual training in abuse awareness and prevention. The individuals we support need to be safe from any kind of abuse. And in order to ensure this, there has to be training, oversight, and accountability. CLNH Abuse Policy, Service Delivery 01-020. The definition of abuse. Abuse is any act or situation that is physical, verbal, emotional, psychological, financial, sexual in nature, or neglectful, that harms or is likely to harm or cause injury to a person with developmental disabilities. And then the policy further elaborates. Behavior which demeans or infringes on personal rights, dignity, or places an individual's health and safety at risk will also not be tolerated. Here are highlights of CLNH policy on abuse. A zero tolerance of any abusive treatment. An environment or culture within the agency that is about freedom from harm. The definition of abuse. Specific forms of abuse are defined. Every staff member has a responsibility to act when abuse of an individual supported is observed or suspected. In the policy, it states that you have a duty to intervene if you're observing an incident taking place, support the victim, ask general or open-ended questions of the victim, document what was observed, reported, or suspected, report to a manager or director what you observed, what was reported to you, or what you suspect. Zero tolerance. The agency policy states that CLNH has a zero tolerance of any form of abusive treatment. Zero tolerance is a way to eliminate undesirable behavior and means that all situations of observed or suspected abuse will be investigated. Suspected abuse is when abuse is not directly observed. It means you believe something happened without certain proof. That is, you don't know for sure. But you have some evidence that suggests abuse may have occurred. An investigation will occur when abuse is suspected to ensure due process. Who investigates depends on the nature and seriousness of the alleged abuse. The police may be called to investigate, or the agency may do its own investigation. Police will investigate serious forms of abuse, such as physical assault, sexual abuse, neglect where the safety or health of an individual has been compromised. The agency will investigate less serious forms of abuse, or where the extent of abuse is unknown at the time. Two examples are verbal abuse and emotional abuse. If the police are called, a serious occurrence report to the ministry is to be filed within 24 hours. The alleged abuser, if a staff member, is to have no contact with the alleged victim for the protection of all parties until the outcome of the investigation. Employees will be supported if there is a false allegation. A way to look at abuse is on a continuum, which shows the level of severity. In this diagram, it shows abuse on a continuum or range from less serious on the left to serious on the right. We can place different forms of abuse on the line to show their relative seriousness. Less serious forms of abuse may be classified as unethical, unprofessional, or disrespectful. On the right, serious forms of abuse may result in injury, they may be illegal, and criminal in intent. Discipline may occur anywhere along the continuum. As the seriousness of the abuse increases, so does the discipline. Let's look at two examples. First, swearing at an individual who is supported. Second, hitting or striking an individual. Moving along the continuum by repeating the same poor behavior. Swearing at a person supported is a form of abuse. While it may not be considered a serious offense on the continuum compared to other offenses, this conduct moves along the continuum when it is repeated behavior. The 6 forms of abuse: physical, sexual, financial or material, verbal, psychological and emotional, neglect. Defining the 6 forms of abuse. Physical abuse. Assault or the threat of an assault. Example, hitting, slapping, burning, that causes or could cause physical injury or the fear of injury. Sexual abuse. Unwanted touching of a person's sexual body parts. The power imbalance between staff and supported individual defines this abuse. Sexual abuse also includes denial of a person's right to engage in consenting sexual behavior. Financial abuse. The misuse, misappropriation, or restriction of an individual's financial assets for personal gain. It includes stealing money or possessions. Verbal abuse. Use of demeaning language and name-calling. Includes negative comments on someone's disability or appearance. Emotional and psychological abuse. is the attempt to control someone by subjecting them to constant criticism, insults, fear, humiliation, or intimidation. Neglect is a failure to provide a person with required support for their health, safety, and well-being. It includes non-attentive to the program requirements. Where might abuse take place? Abuse can happen at the family home, at the client's residence within the agency, the mall, library, the workplace, schools, hospitals, recreation facilities, in any public area. There are no boundaries to abuse. What does the research say about the extent of abuse of those with disabilities? It says that abuse of individuals with developmental disabilities occurs many times more frequently than the general population for sexual and physical abuse. The importance of work cultures. Staff have control, or at least to some extent, over their work environment, and that control can lead to either a culture that is positive or one that is negative. A house or program area can promote a positive environment that leads to a safe and comfortable place for all, or a negative environment that can lead to an abusive culture within the house or program area. What does an environment look like that is toxic, where conditions are such that it is more likely that abuse may occur? A house or program where staff are negative, complain a lot, often in bad moods, raise their voices at each other, gossip about coworkers, don't cooperate with each other, blame one another for things that go wrong or not done, talk about not being happy working for the agency or doing this type of work, run things the way staff want it, without compromise, input from individuals, or care what individuals want. Each of us doing our part in creating a positive work environment means a positive environment for those supported. This is the end of the presentation for module number 1. Complete the quiz for this module.